This video I'll be showing you, I'll be testing the Overdrive Relay. If you're unsure of what a relay is or does, then you should check out my relay videos. And if you're unsure what the Overdrive does, and if you're unsure of how the relay operates, how the overdrive operates, then you should watch my T96 videos explaining that. Although I'll give a quick recap. So this relay here, this is actually the same one that I used on my video, so you should probably watch that if you want to understand how this works. But this relay is basically a twin, what I like to call a twin switch relay. So it actually needs two switches on at the same time for the relay switch to be on. So the relay is a switch itself, and it's controlled by two switches. So these two switches need to be on at the same time for the relay to be on and allow current to pass through it. So the first switch is, well, there isn't an order, but one of the switches is the overdrive governor. And the governor is a set of weights that when the engine reaches the required, when the transmission reaches the required RPMs, rotations per minute, it gets, it's turning fast enough that it opens, they spread apart and push a contact point against another, allowing current to flow, closing the circuit. So that's one switch. And the other switch is just a normal, on-off switch, a toggle switch that allows you to turn the overdrive off, or in other words, turn the relay off and thereby turning off the solenoid. And the overdrive relay itself, it turns the overdrive solenoid on and off. And the solenoid is just an electromagnet that pushes in a lever in and out, engaging another gear that engages the overdrive. So for complete explanation about that, you have to watch my T96 videos. But for now, what I'd like to test this relay. It got stuck the other day, so maybe there's too much amperage going through it. When I got it, I drove it for a while and the fuse was burnt. So right there's a fuse. It's one of the first things I check. And if you can see that metal part inside the fuse, that means that fuse is still good. So when the fuse is bad, that little steel piece connecting the two caps there, it breaks and then electricity can't flow through it anymore. So this relay, this here is the input from the battery. So this comes straight from positive terminal on the battery. And then it goes out through that other blue wire there. And that goes to the solenoid. So this happens to be the one on the left, this one here. Right? And then doesn't really matter which side they're connected to. And then it requires, for the overdrive to be on, the driver needs to allow the overdrive to be on by pushing the toggle switch to the on position, and the transmission has to be at the correct RPMs. And there's a reason why you can, but you shouldn't bypass the governor and just turn the overdrive on whenever you want. Basically, you don't want overdrive in first gear because there's too much force going to the transmission overdrive portion, and that could damage it. So the overdrive was, again, just designed to be used overdrive, past third gear, for cruising, not for taking off at the bottom of a steep hill. So it was designed for fast and not force, for speed and not force. And first gear, the car is stopped, you need a lot of force to move the car. And again, I explained all this in a different video. But right now, so first thing, I've already checked the fuse. Second thing is I want to make sure this relay is not shut closed. So if I connect my test light, the output of that relay should be positive, because the solenoid itself is grounded, and so it needs a positive side basically to complete the circuit. So if it's a positive side, then if it's on, then the light will turn on if the light is connected to negative. So I connect the light to negative on the battery, and the light doesn't turn on because that tells me that the relay is off. Now for the governor is completely insulated or isolated from the negative and the positive of the car. And what that does is the governor provides the ground portion for the relay, the ground circuit for turning that electromagnet off. So again, the electromagnet, like any other electrical component, needs the positive and the negative, so to speak. So the governor has to be isolated from the car. Now, if for whatever reason the governor isn't isolated from the car, then we should get a circuit or a light turning on if I put the light on positive, because again, it's supposed to be negative. But it should also not be connected to the positive or negative, because, like I said, it's completely isolated. If the governor were to provide a positive terminal, then the other terminal would have to be negative. But the way the car works, maybe there is a governor like that, but the governor in this car is just completely isolated, and there's only one wire coming from it. So whenever there's one wire coming from a source of voltage, it has to be the ground. So if I leave the test light on negative, the big blue wire shouldn't turn on. That means there's no electricity going through that relay. So I'm going to move it to now the positive. So maybe there's junk or a wire or a pipe, something touching the governor wire, causing it to ground. So that would cause this light to turn on. And as you can see, the light is turning on. So that tells me that something is causing the governor to turn on when it's not supposed to. The car is not even moving. How is the governor turning on? And what could possibly happen is those two terminals are very close to each other, and sometimes you have wires. Wires connect, touching each of those terminals. And that could cause a situation. But in this case, there's nothing happening. So right away, that tells me that something is off with the governor or the wiring from it. Now, so that's my problem there. But let me continue with the testing procedure here. And the way I sort of figured that there was a problem is that the car was not going into reverse. I couldn't physically move the gear lever into reverse. And it was very hard to put it in first gear. It was almost, even though I put it in first gear, it would take off very slowly. Again, probably because the overdrive was on. Fortunately, it's... I don't think I damaged the overdrive, because I drove the car normally and there wasn't any crunching, no noises, nothing, so the overdrive should still be fine. I know the overdrive was still engaging because I was still able to go at 110 kilometers an hour. That wouldn't be possible if the overdrive wasn't on. So, again, that's my problem there. That should be completely isolated. Let me take the fuse off and see if it still turns on, because that would then really confirm the tests. As you can see, it's still on. So we have negative, or we have ground from the governor, and we shouldn't have that. So the only thing that's left to check is the switch itself. The switch is brand new and the wiring is brand new, so I don't expect a problem there. But just for the sakes of testing, this here is the wire coming from the switch itself. So if it's coming from the switch, and the switch there's connected to the positive side of the battery, so the switch is providing the positive for the relay, or the electromagnet on the relay. Now if the switch is off, then we shouldn't have any negative. We shouldn't get a light here. We're getting a dim light, so it's somehow, see, that light is brighter and this light is dimmer. So I think that somehow, I think this relay is damaged. So if I put a big fuse here, this is a bigger fuse than what was already in it, originally in it, so I might have burnt the fuse. That solenoid uses quite a bit of amperage, 40 amps if I'm not mistaken, from what the manual says. So it has to be a pretty powerful relay. This relay, although designed for the overdrive, it's a proper overdrive relay. You know, it's probably a bit under-designed. So what will happen is I'll probably end up using a starter relay. But let's just confirm the tests here. So I'm getting negative from this here. Now I'm going to go inside the car and turn that switch on. So in my case, the ignition also has to be on. Give me a minute. So right now I've got my test light connected to the negative terminal, and the switch, overdrive switch, is off. And that wire is going down into, so that's going to the governor, or from the governor rather. And so that wire, that little black wire, is coming from, and if I follow it, as you can see, it's coming from the switch. Right now, with switch off, it's working. So the switch is working because there's no light here. When the switch is on, it should connect this wire to the positive. So between positive and negative, we should get a light. Let's see if that's the case. So the switch is now on the on position, and as you can see, we have a light. So that tells me that that's on. The switch is working. Now I might as well check the governor side here. As you can see, there's a light turning on. And this here, this is not supposed to happen. So basically we have positive coming from the governor. As you can see, it's sort of clicking, or it might be just feeding through from the battery light here. I'm not sure. You can see just by touching it, it's engaging something in that relay. about the output. So yeah, the output is off. So it's telling me that the relay is off. So even though the switch is on, the relay is still not allowing electricity because it's still off because it still hasn't received power from the governor, right? Because the car isn't moving at all. It's not reached the required RPMs. Now, one thing that I'm surprised is that the electricity, when you're using a test light, electricity is flowing through the light and into the other end. So it's actually bringing in negative from the battery. It's bypassing the governor. That's why it's turning the relay on. So the relay still seems to be working. But it's still not allowing current when it's off. So that tells me that the relay is working. What I'd like to do is, it would be nice to install some lights, install a light bulb from the output, and that would tell me when the overdrive is on and when the overdrive is off. And that would be really nice for showing exactly when the overdrive is able to turn on and which speed. So I'd be able to look at, the speedometer and look at when, in terms of the speed, and then look at which speed the light turns on. But that's something for another day. Yeah, I think I pretty much covered everything on how to test that relay. So I just went inside the car and I just checked that the reverse is now engaging. So what I think probably happened is that the pull-in coil on that solenoid still remained energized and it didn't disconnect the overdrive for some reason. It could due to the fact that I'm using very thick gear oil, and the manual said you could use 85W140, I think, for the gear oil, and I'm using 90W180 or something like that. I'm not too certain, but I've heard some people saying that if you use too thick oil on the transmission with the overdrive, it's bad. It could cause problems like sticking. So this could be the issue that I'm having. The manual also says you could use 10W30 engine oil, so that's way thinner than the gear oil, and it says you can use that. It actually recommends using the engine oil on the transmission. So it might just have been a case where the relay or maybe the solenoid remained stuck for some reason, but they seem to be working fine now. But anyways, that's how you test the components on the relay. And by the way, although the starter relay also has 4 terminals, you have to remember that one of the terminals is not affecting the electromagnet. So one of the terminals, the I terminal, is just the same as, it's just another output terminal. So this one actually only has one output terminal, one battery connection terminal, and 2 control input terminals. This relay here. The starter relay just has one battery terminal, and it has 2 output terminals and only 1 control input terminal. So only one polarity to control it. So the starter relay is actually itself grounded by that piece of steel. And so this one isn't. Just for you to know a difference, but I'll probably talk about that in another video. So if you Google some of the newer starter relays, they no longer have that I terminal. It's just the S terminal. So that's a bit of info there.